So whether or not you take the car to a shop, or in this case a dealer more specifically, you'll probably at the end of the service get something like this: green, yellow, and red. Now most people wouldn't really understand what that is, but at the end the service advisor would typically go over it and explain to you in brief matter of, why did you get yellow, why did you get red, and how everything else is green. Now to most people they wouldn't quite understand it, so since this car needs an oil change, I figured, well, why don't I go through some of the components with you. So after doing all the inspection in the car, whether there's check engine light, something to note down, checking the turn signals, headlights, etc., washer fluid and wipers, which I didn't do because I kind of cleaned the car a little bit. I didn't want any of the residue. But anyways, after that, pop the hood, and you want to check everything underneath here. And this is where that checklist comes to life in regards to the condition of various things. Now, one of the first things that they do check would be the battery. Each car is tailored to have a certain CCA, cold cranking amps. Basically what that means is a certain car will need an amount of CCA in order for it to basically work in cold conditions. Smaller car takes smaller battery, bigger cars take bigger batteries. So as the battery increases in size, so does the CCA rating. Now I don't have that particular CCA rating tool, but what I do have is a regular multimeter like this, and I could check the voltage. Now one way to do that is have the setting here, check for voltage. So anyways, you're going to want to change it to volts, and you want to want the correct rating, and positive to positive, negative to negative. So what you're looking for is anything below the 12 voltage range is a bad battery. Now when the car is on, the voltage will be approximately 14 or so, that being because the alternator is charging the battery. One thing I do is check the oil before draining it, just to check if it's burning any oil or if it's got a milky substance, in case there's actually coolant mixing with the oil. So clean it off first, and then you're going to want to dip it back in to get the correct level. Roughly below half, and still kind of clean, not too dark. Another thing is also you want to check the drive belts. You want to see if it's cracked or shows any signs of aging or wear. That needs to be noted down. Another thing is also checking the coolant level. Now if the car is cold, it will be at the minimum line. Now it comes in hot, you're going to see it rise up somewhere in the middle to the higher max portion. It will fluctuate depending on how hot or cold the engine is. And the other thing you're going to want to check is the coolant hoses. Make sure they're not swollen or in any condition which they need to be replaced, such as cracking or whatnot. Now on to checking the brake fluid and clutch fluid, both typically using .3, .4. You can check the color and the level. Now Honda recommends on regular street use to change it every 3 years. Reason being because brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it will absorb moisture contaminating the internals. You're going to want to do a general engine-based scan, check for oil leaks, seepage, any component wear from wires or hoses, belts, etc. Anything to note down, as well as check the air filter, which on this one's aftermarket. And the other thing is the cabin filter, which coincidentally on this inspection sheet there isn't a checkbox for it. Now mine is, would say dirty, so I got to keep that as a side note to replace later. And if there was an automatic transmission, you'd also want to check the dipstick on that, see what the fluid is and the condition. And anytime before you drain the oil, you're going to want to take off the oil cap so you can allow more air to flow in through the engine. It just makes it smoother. Once underneath the car, be sure to have your drain bucket and a 17mm wrench or socket and ratchet, whichever you prefer, to loosen the oil pan bolt, and also have a few rags or a cloth towel just to have to clean any extra spillage. Now once the bolt is loose, let that drain, and then you can come from above, loosen up the old oil filter and take that off, and just let it all drain at once while you do the inspection underneath the car. So now that you're under here, you're going to want to check the oil pan itself, casings, everything. And well, my casing's starting to seep out in my transmission. You can tell oil pan's pretty dry. You also want to check underneath other things. You can see mounts, the exhaust itself. So you're going to want to move from front to back. Just a basic little overview. Check out the exhaust, make sure everything's, proper. No holes, anything like that. Everything, all the mounting's fine. I'm going to check the prop shaft. Then you come towards the back. You're going to want to check out the differential. See if it's leaking at all. Also the rear drive shafts. Check out the boots. And everything seems intact. Well, so next thing, after you've gone underneath, you're going to want to take all the wheels off, and then that's when you're going to do the brake inspection. You're also going to be able to check out the wheels. Now lug nuts on Acuras and Hondas typically are either going to be a 19mm socket or 22. 19 typically on the smaller cars, smaller SUVs, 22 being the bigger SUVs. So let's go ahead and take them off. Now with the wheels off, you have a better view of your suspension and components, such as the steering rack, this one being an electric rack, as well as seeing the upper and lower control arms, the struts and shocks themselves. You will see the ball joints, see if there's any wear as leaking any grease or if the boots are torn. You come down, check out the sway bar end links, see if those are torn as well. And the common thing with these Hondas are the compliance bushings. You can check if that's cracked or torn, as well as the other components portraying if this was a front-wheel drive, you'd see both the steering rack and the drive shafts together. Now to checking the brake pad life. Now this is a common brake pad gauge tool consisting of green, yellow, and red. For this particular example, you are able to actually slide this in through the caliper and check the millimeter life. Green indicating good, yellow being cautionary, red meaning it would need to be changed. Now moving to the rear portion of the car, it's the same in regards to checking the components. Although here, since it's a rear-wheel drive car, you are able to see the drive shafts and CV boots, which you're going to want to check if there's any tears or leaks, as well as check the suspension, the ball joints, control arm bushings, suspension in regards to the strut, shocks, if there's any seepage or leaks, sway bar end links, and other components in regards to just wanting to keep an open eye if there's any wear that needs to be noted down or addressed in the future. And checking the rear brakes is essentially the same procedure as the front. You're going to want to repeat inspection on every corner of the car, not just one side, so you can get an accurate reading of where everything is at. Now to reading the tire depth on all four tires. You're going to want to use a tire depth gauge on the 32nd side and read 3 sections of the tire and get the lowest recording. And with that recording, it gives a more consistent reading as to where the tire is, as well as you're going to want to check the tire, get a feel if there's any cupping or inner outer wear, and rotate it around to see if there's any punctures that need to be addressed. With regards to tire rotation, this is a special case because the tires are directional, as well as the car has a staggered setup, meaning the rear wheels are wider than the front, and the front and rear are not interchangeable because of that. Now to checking the tires PSI, which the ratings can be found on the door jamb. Since I don't have a compressor at home, I'm only able to actually check the PSI on all 4 tires. Normally at a shop, they'll check it as well as fill it up if it needs any air. With the inspection finished, it's time to put the drain bolt and new washer back on, as well as clean up any oil residue you may find. Now to be exact, you can use a 3/8 torque wrench with a setting of about 30 foot-pound when tightening the bolt back on. With the new oil filter, be sure to put some oil on the seal before you tighten it back on. With the car lowered, you're going to want to torque the lug nuts in a cross pattern to ensure that they are properly torqued. My 1/2-inch torque wrench is set at about 80 foot-pound, which is a common rating with Honda 19mm lug nuts. You don't want to both leave them loose or over torque them. So with the oil change and inspection pretty much done, all that's left is, well, the rest of the paperwork. With most of the paperwork already finished, only a few things that needed to be noted down. Much of my stuff here is green. The only thing that really would need attention is the brakes, which are yellow, as well as the side note we made of the cabin filter. Anyways, I hope this video helped you out one way or another. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, check out the channel, as well as our other pages.